Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I am Billy Embody. With me is Shea Dixon, as always, and we're going to jump right into the news that dominated the weekend. Jamar Cain leaving LSU for a pass rush specialist job with the Denver Broncos. That news being broken by our On3 national reporter, Matt Zenitz, and then confirmed by the team on Monday. Shea, this leaves Brian Kelly with a big opening on staff as defensive line coach during spring practice, headed off to the NFL. What's your initial reaction, and where does Brian Kelly go from here?
I guess I don't think we were shocked by this. Now, when the news came out over the weekend, Billy, on Saturday, I believe it was, we quickly found out that you had heard that he had interviewed for a couple of different NFL jobs. They had practiced in Baton Rouge on Tuesday. He had reportedly, or I don't even know if this was reported, we had heard he went to the interview with the Broncos on Wednesday, came back to practice on Thursday, and by the weekend, he had obviously made the decision to take the job with the Denver Broncos, head to the NFL. He let the team know, at least the defensive linemen, on Saturday. So it was, I think that you have to say that the gigantic outside linebacker new role, going from a staffer to an outside linebackers coach, could have played a role in here. I don't know how big, but Cain went from coaching a whole, entire group of guys to just defensive linemen. But that was very short-lived. He was already in an offseason where you don't just suddenly start interviewing for other jobs. So I bet he's had his eye on NFL for multiple years. And Billy, I don't wonder, or I'm starting to wonder more and more, I should say, if because of college football now and the recruiting calendar and it pretty much just being a 365-day-a-year job where you're recruiting, you're coaching, you're worrying about 18 to 22-year-olds going to class and all these different things, that the NFL, where you essentially work for 7 months of the year, Billy, I mean, you worked in the Redskins staff personnel department for a while. Those coaches haven't made. They're off for 4 or 5 months, and they don't recruit anybody. The GMs, front office, everybody else handles that. All they have to do is show up and coach. He gets a job with Sean Payton. Vance Joseph is the DC, a Louisiana native. So it's a big move for him. If he wants to have a career in the NFL, you've got to make that step. So not shocked by it. And certainly I don't think I'd be shocked by any college coaches now, especially younger ones, making that move to the NFL after they've already had a big stretch in college where they've been a D-line coach at a number of different schools.
Yeah, I think the timing, I was a little surprised in the sense that, they were into spring ball. Sometimes that can really calm the coaching carousel, so to speak. But, we talked with some different sources kind of after the fact and, even outside of LSU. And this wasn't something where Jamar Cain was reached out to by the Broncos and this all came together really quickly. He had multiple interviews, including one with the Baltimore Ravens, a couple other teams over the course of the last few months. And, we talked about it on the board. A lot of people want to say, oh, was this blindsided? Was this not blindsided? They weren't blindsided. I mean, Brian Kelly did know, talking multiple sources, that Jamar Cain was interviewing. That he knew. He didn't know if that would ultimately lead to a job offer from the Denver Broncos, but it did. And then he took it, and now they have to officially get underway with a coaching search for the spot. And I think this is one thing where you can kind of have both sides be true. Like, I don't think Jamar Cain would have left for another college job. I think he either could have gone to a smaller school to be a first-time coordinator, but very unlikely that he would have passed up $1.2 million to be a D-line coach elsewhere. I mean, not many schools are necessarily going to pay much more than that to do it. So you go to the NFL, you get to coach one position, a position that he's very familiar with and had a lot of success with. Nick Bonino, I'm pretty sure he's with he's with the Broncos. And so Jamar Cain coached him at Oklahoma. So I imagine that had something to do with it as well. So these things can kind of come together in a sense over a period of time and then become official really quickly, which is what we saw. This isn't necessarily something where they were blindsided. They could, they knew that he was interviewing with other teams. It's just a matter of if he was going to get that call. He did. Now he's on his way to the NFL. So I think this is a big loss for LSU. I think, this is a critical year for them recruiting the defensive line and defensive tackles in particular, as we all know, and we've talked about a lot on this podcast and on the board. So Brian Kelly has to go make a splash. But I'll, make this note. Last year, we heard some rumors of this and that guy kind of being heavily in the mix. And then really last minute, Brian Kelly got the chance to get one more stab at Jamar Cain before he really left for USC from Oklahoma. He did. They obviously agreed to a deal, worked out. It just didn't last very long, but that's how quickly things can come together, and Brian Kelly can make a splash just like he did with Jamar Cain. I mean, that was a big hire when he brought him in. Obviously, he brought in 5-star Deshaun Womack and beat out plenty of schools for Jackson Howard. He got a lot out of Mekhi Wingo. Jacoby and Guillory got emotional talking about it on Saturday with Jamar Cain's departure, but now they've got to go get somebody who can really clean up this 2024 class on the defensive line. I'm really intrigued to see where Brian Kelly goes.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Maybe some candidates we've heard. We've already dropped a hot board 1.0. We'll have some more names coming. But you did get me to thinking with the Nick Benito, who played at Oklahoma, and Coach Cain, Jamar coached him there. But stock up for chances of the Broncos taking a hard look at a B.J. Ojulari or a Jaquelin Roy, or maybe in the coming years, Mekhi Wingo, Mason Smith type. So always good to have a former coach on an NFL staff and pushing to maybe get guys drafted. Be interesting to see.
Yeah, I agree with you. One more note. My old boss actually with the Redskins is now on staff with the Broncos. So got no heads up there, not outing a source or anything like that from him, but he's assistant to the head coach. So I'll have to give him some grief over not getting a little heads up that Jamar was indeed headed to be a Denver Bronco. So,
yeah. And I'll say this too, Billy, you played at SMU, you went to SMU, you've covered an SMU site for a long time where coaches come through. You've been here at LSU, 5-6 years with me? Yep. More than that, maybe. Covered a lot of coaches who've come through. And we both got to know Jamar, both as a coach and away from the field. And great guy everywhere he's been, Arizona State, Oklahoma, LSU, everyone's loved him. So congrats to him. He was he's certainly worthy of continuing to move up and in whatever sort of coaching career he wants to chase after.
Yeah, and shout out to him for, like you mentioned earlier, not having to live, breathe recruiting 365 days a year, because
good for him.
It's a war out there for defensive linemen out there. Brian Kelly's about to go to war potentially with some other schools over there, defensive line coaches trying to make a big splash on this one. Shea, let's start off with a name that when you say D-line at LSU and you're talking about the D-line coach, there's an opening. It always seems like this one name is one fans are clamoring for and always fires up the rumor mill.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at really any year, gosh, we can go back to probably when Beau Davis left LSU, or I should say really got with Alabama and Saban started rolling. And he was at LSU at the time, went to the Miami Dolphins, went to Bama with him, had 2 stops as Bama's D-line coach, but was a guy that then, admitted he had talked to some recruits off campus. Now it's not nearly a decade ago, but 2016, 17, got hit with an NCAA show cause because of it, had to step down off Saban's staff, and hasn't been back to the SEC since. Well, Billy, we're a year out from Texas being in the SEC, and he has been Texas's D-line coach as show cause ended. He had done a brief stint with the Detroit Lions for a couple of years during that time, but there aren't many guys who are a combination of coach recruiter that are as respected as Beau Davis is. And again, I mean, he's a Mississippi native, but played at LSU in the early 90s, started his first coaching job, was a grad assistant at LSU in the late 90s, came back with Saban, as I noted, worked with Tommy Moffitt and that strength and conditioning staff. So yes, I think that forever LSU fans have hoped that whomever is head coach can find a way to get Beau Davis back. Now, Texas has lots of money. They can keep whoever they want to keep. He and Sarkisian have coached together before, coaching together now, so they've got a very good relationship. And certainly Texas is a school that recruits well and is going to always be at least in the mix to start the season to compete for championships. They certainly have talent. But that's the one that everybody initially says. And I have no kind of real doubts that Brian Kelly is going to or already has looked down that road and weighed whether or not he would want him as a target, and wherever it goes from there, you see. But I do know that that would be one of, if not the top name that I would mention. I mean, that is your sort of dream list name.
Yeah, and you could go across the board on multiple staffs, and there are incredible defensive line coaches across the country. You could say, well, LSU should throw the bank at so-and-so and so-and-so. And Beau Davis would be on that list. And the connections make a lot of sense. I mean, we talked about it on the board a little bit. His recruiting ability is right up there. I mean, that's really what a lot of people covet him for, I would say, at least. Obviously, he's worked for Saban, so he gets it done on the field as well. But his 2022 class at Texas, I mean, 6 4-star prospects across the defensive line, including multiple top 150 overall defensive tackles, which is really important. He recruited a little bit of Louisiana with Jamar Cain, of course. So he's got those recruiting chops in a time when it's very difficult to recruit the defensive line and get those really impressive hauls. Not many schools can consistently do it. And Beau Davis is a part of that at Texas, getting that top end talent to campus. So I think this is one where you've got to circle him and see if it can all fall in place. Texas is going to fight like hell to keep him. That's the reality of it. He's been with Sark for a while now. He's obviously got the Saban stamp of approval. That's probably why they brought him in and things like that. But you've got to look also elsewhere, because there's a really, real possibility that there's going to be others out there. And I'm intrigued to see if they can make a run at, another big name, or if they go up and comer, or if it's somebody with a connection to a Matt House.
Yeah, look, and I'll add one more thing on Beau Davis, just because he gets mentioned as a top target, and I do believe he should be. But Texas is a big-time job, and he's been the D-line coach there for a few years now. So you think, much like you just said about Jamar Cain, you didn't think he would leave for another college D-line job. Well, is Beau Davis leaving there for another college D-line job? I would think not, unless it's LSU, where he played and coached, Alabama, where Nick Saban still is, and he's worked for him multiple times, maybe at Georgia, because they're obviously elite. He knows Kirby well. There's connections there. But I couldn't name you many more programs that I would think Beau Davis would leave Texas for to take the same job at another school. So you mentioned it. It's tough sledding. If you go after him, and I'm sure every year schools are going after Beau Davis, Texas knows what to do to keep him. Now, LSU does have the benefit that he played football here, coached here, began his career here. So there is a little bit of that pull. And we'll see if Kelly even goes after him, or maybe what direction they want to go in. I'll give you mentioned connection to House, and our Hot Board 1.0 is up. You can check that out. Full breakdowns on folks we're hearing. And Billy will have some more names. We'll do another Hot Board this week, 2.0, so stay tuned for that. But Jimmy Brumbaugh at Coastal, who Coastal's been a very good team in recent years, he was there this past season. That was because he left. He was part of that Brian Harsin staff. But you look at kind of SEC experience, and he played at Auburn, but coached at Auburn. Let's see, Tennessee, I believe. Co-defensive coordinator 2020, also D-line coach. But notably is the Kentucky stop, because he was there for 4 years. But during one of those years, he coached with Matt House. And Matt House is now LSU's defensive coordinator. And Billy, you would think that would mean he has a big hand in choosing who ultimately they hire. He knows Brumbaugh. Brumbaugh's considered a good recruiter. So just another name that we heard that could pop into the mix, that might have some interest. And look, if it goes anywhere, we'll see. But when you start to mention guys like that, and again, even Brumbaugh, let's get a year here for you. Worked at LSU from 2006 to 7 under Moffitt as a strength coach. So a lot like Beau Davis, too, had worked as a strength coach at LSU. They had some good ones come through there. Now these guys have moved on and been D-line coaches and been big SEC coaches, or I should say at big SEC schools for a number of years, certainly qualified enough to get a look. And we'll see where it goes. But that was one more name we had heard.
Yeah, so check out the Hot Board. I'll drop some more notes. They'll probably be up by the time you guys are listening to this podcast Monday night. So check that out. On the defensive line coaching search, John Jancic does coach the Jacks. Gerald Chapman is stepping up right now as that defensive line coach. And one more note, Beau Davis makes $875,000 at Texas. We'll say Texas, no state income tax. Louisiana has state income tax. So I would say it would take, probably 1.2 at least to get him to listen. And then you get into that war with Texas over bidding to keep him. And it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, you're always going to say that too. He's going to say, if you paid the last guy this, I need at least that. So
that's why Bo Pelini got paid what Dave Aranda got paid.
Yeah, go ahead. Final thoughts there, though. Congrats to Jamar. Obviously, he was excited about it. I saw he had the entire D-line over at his house over the weekend, hanging out, cooking, all that. But he heads to Denver. The search is on, and I will say this. We both said this on the board, but I'll let you speak for yourself here, and I'm going to give my opinion. My number one quality for the D-line coach is an excellent recruiter. I just think that if you start reeling off the same type of talent on the defensive line that even Texas, but Bama, Georgia, those schools are getting, that's what wins you games and championships in the SEC. LSU is shorthanded on the D-line this year, but still had big moments from guys like Mekhi Wingo and Jaquelin Roy and B.J. Ojolari, and now you get Mason Smith back, and you brought in a 5-star Deshaun Womack. You want that to continue and add more of them. So Jamar Cain was known as a good recruiter before he got here. He had recruited a lot of guys to Oklahoma. He obviously went national to recruit a lot of guys at LSU. I'm just, for my opinion, obviously, if you're getting a look from Brian Kelly and getting hired, you're going to be a good coach, technically. Like, you understand the game and know how to coach it. I want that position to also be one of the best recruiters on the staff. That would be a preference if I'm Brian Kelly.
Well, and it's one of those positions that if you recruit it extremely well, it's really hard to screw it up. And I mean that not to, dumb it down as far as, how to coach the defensive line, but it is a hell of a lot easier to coach a Mason Smith, a Deshaun Womack, a Caleb Von Chasson, a B.J. Ojolari. I mean, the list over the years just kind of goes on. You get these freaky guys that have that athleticism and in some cases a combination of incredible size and athleticism to come in, they're going to be able to just kind of go play. And Mason Smith was very raw coming in. He's figured it out. He's been, we're expecting massive things from him this year. There's no doubt about that. You got to recruit at an elite level. You really do. You could kind of teach guys how to play linebacker if they've got the tools, but that D-line spot, you really want those guys that are almost ready-made, especially in this league.
Yeah, well, we are tuned in. We'll have plenty of updates on the Bengal Tigers, so stay tuned.
So big D-line visitor this weekend coming in as well, Alex January. A quick note on him. He's four-star defensive lineman out of Duncanville, Texas. He is still going to come in. He is coming into town. His dad confirmed that to me. So the D-line recruiting won't stop. Be sure to keep it locked on the Bengal Tiger for all things recruiting and team and coaching search now as we dive into it. $10 for 4 months, and then you get the Bengal Tiger Founders Club hat. So be sure to subscribe as well to make sure you get covered on all that as spring ball rolls on. Shea, one thing that was unveiled on Monday as well, and with all the Jamar Cain news, kind of glossed over it in a sense, and it kind of snuck up on us, but On3 unveiled the first 2025 On 300 rankings. So 300 prospects, not all 4 stars. About 2/3 of them did pick up 4 stars, but some in the 200 to 300 range aren't 4 stars. So still working up that list to even more. But that's the first list unveiled. Look, Louisiana, we talked about that running back group. Harlem Berry comes in as the number 13 overall prospect in the country, the number 2 running back, and he's the top-ranked player in Louisiana, which has 10 prospects in the On 300. So Louisiana in 2025 looking strong early on.
100%. And these kids just finished up sophomore season. So even for diehard recruiting fans, you're just now finding out who these guys are. So I'm going to not dumb it down. I'm going to simplify it here for everyone listening because I don't expect you to know who all these guys are. But what I'll do is I'll give you some notable sort of stats here, and Billy, you can react, but this I think really drives home how deep the state is. And 10 guys made the 2025 initial top 300. For this current class of guys who are about to be seniors, there's not even 10 in it yet. So that's a huge number out of the gates. It'll only rise. It leads you to believe this is going to be one of the deepest years in Louisiana for high-level college prospects or college football prospects in a number of years. And number one, first thing that'll jump out to you is they have the number one player in Louisiana is Harlem Berry. He is the number 2 running back in the country. And number 13 overall. Well, the number 1 running back is number 11 overall, and they have the same rating. So Harlem Berry very much on track coming out of St. Martin's Episcopal in Metairie to be a 5-star for one, Billy, then to maybe be the number 1 overall running back. I've heard people comp him to Jamal Charles. This kid is really electrifying. LSU offered him during Brian Kelly's first summer camp. Frank Wilson was there. He was one of the youngest guys in attendance. Wasn't even ranked at the time by schools. LSU becomes offer number 1 for him. Then James Simon gives him 2 top 10 running backs. James Simon coming out of Calvary Baptist up in Shreveport. Another thing, Shreveport, with 2 at Captain Shreve and 1 at Calvary Baptist, gets 3 guys in the initial top 10 in Louisiana. So North Louisiana will have guys. I know LSU is always kind of looking into North Louisiana to try to really establish their footing there. They've got usually a pretty good grip on South Louisiana. The test will be, can they get into Shreveport and really hit a home run with 3 guys already in the top 300? But 2 linebackers in the top 15, Keelan Moses and then Corey Amos out of Opelousas. The only LSU commitment in Louisiana, Brett Bordelon, makes the list as the number 11 interior offensive lineman in the country. And beyond Captain Shreve getting 2 in, U-High gets 2 in, Keelan Moses and another one, Jaden Gloston, a cornerback. There's not only a lot of talent, but a lot of seemingly top-end talent because these guys are checking in very high at their position groups. Even guys like Trey Fuller out of Captain Shreve, who's checks in at number 10, number 299 overall. So Billy sort of squeezes in to the back end of the top 300. He's inside the top 25 safeties in the country. So Louisiana has talent, and there will be more guys. I'm telling you, Deshaun Ford at Opelousas. You could sort of go up into the Teron Francis at Edna Carr. I'm looking sort of at some of my notes here. Davian Jackson, another safety at Westgate, is a good player. Nate Shepard and Xavier Ford, 2 more running backs. Jalen Coleman, a 3rd running back. That's going to be a really deep group at running back with 2 of them already in the top 10. And I also continue to notice beyond Corey Amos, Landon Hammond, a cornerback at Opelousas, I think is one of the best players. Another one being Deshaun Ford, the running back at Opelousas. So there are some schools here early. It's looking like schools like U-High, Captain Shreve, Opelousas that are going to have multiple players that Westgate that are pretty highly recruited. Will be interesting to see kind of how LSU fares at each of those spots. But a deep class, there is going to be more names emerge over time, right? So I expect them to continue to add more to the top 300. And what it does for me, Billy, all this tells me is if LSU handles business in Louisiana, you get one of the best recruiting classes in the country because then you can just pick your needs position-wise of what you don't have in state, go out there and target them. I think this is setting up to be a huge cycle for LSU coming off of a year, this current cycle, where Louisiana's kind of down, so they're having to go national a lot. That won't be the case in 25.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, really excited about Harlem Berry and James Simon. I'm going to go over and probably catch James Simon's spring game in Shreveport. So for our Shreveport listeners, let me know May 16th. I think that Tuesday I'll be over there catching that spring game, seeing him play for the first time in person on the field at least. Saw him in 7-on-7 briefly as well. He's just a big body. I mean, talking with Charles Powers about him, really like how he can catch the football as running back, very skilled catching the football, and for how big he is, I mean, he's pretty quick. That was one thing Charles honed in on, just that quickness to find the hole, hit the hole, do all those things. And, I just think if LSU can get those two guys in at running back. I mean, if you want to pick up a third, you can, but those two guys at running back would be outstanding in 2025. Obviously, the state's pretty deep. They had Devin Harper, the offensive lineman, out of Captain Shreve on campus earlier in January. He'll be back again. He's really high on LSU. He's got an offer from Ole Miss. He's got an offer from Mississippi State. He's visited Ole Miss. He's going to visit Mississippi State. But you can tell his heart is at LSU. So if he does get that offer, I think he'll jump on it as well. This is just a really exciting class. I think it's a class that we know a good bit about. When the rankings, hit our inbox, I didn't sit there and say, that so-and-so I'd have here or have there. You can make the argument for Deshaun Ford out of Opelousas to, certainly be in there, and others. But I felt pretty good about where this 2025 class came out for us right off the bat.
No, 100%. Here, I'll give you one more name of a guy whose film I saw that was impressive, and I think could be a guy that college coaches have eventually jump in on. I don't think he has any offers right now. Tyron Winslow, D lineman out of HL Bourgeois. So keep an eye on him. I got him a profile, Billy. So he's got that going for him. He'll end up getting some offers, but I'm going to have a story on the site Tuesday on the Bengal Tiger. Right now, you can go on the site and read about all 10 guys who made it into the top 300. I'll have a story about at least 10 more guys who are going to be highly recruited by colleges. So as you noted, excited to cover this one because it is a deep, deep class in Louisiana.
No question. And look, LSU fans have a lot to be excited about because they're going to get Bryce Underwood, the 5-star quarterback. We talked about him a ton. The number 1 overall prospect, the number 1 player at the quarterback position for On3 in the class of 2025. He's going to be back on campus in April. So be sure to check out the notes. Chad Simmons dropped on the site as well as him being a 5-star. And look, we mentioned it. Charles Power broke it down. He's just one of those guys that is starting to look like a true generational type quarterback. And LSU's offered. They've had him on campus. They're going to have him on campus again. They're trending well early for a guy of his caliber.
Yeah, I've talked to a few college coaches who say that Bryce Underwood, when you look at, and he's a sophomore out of Michigan, has already visited LSU, is just on campus this month, has got every college out there recruiting him. But Joe Sloan has done a good job getting in on him early, getting him to campus. That's what you want to do when these guys are early in their process. But you look at these past couple of classes and meaning guys who have already signed, that's now they've had full evaluation cycles. Last year it was Arch Manning and Nicholas Iamaliva and Jackson Arnold, who went to Oklahoma. The year prior to that, I think it was like Devin Brown and Drew Aller, who went to Penn State. But I'm giving you some of the guys who finished like in the top 10 nationally or were the number 1 overall quarterback and overall prospects in the country. I've had multiple college coaches say, Bryce Underwood, if this keeps up, is better than those guys. And he can run it. He can throw it. He has size, an impressive prospect.
Yeah, I love what he brings to the table. I mean, you also have George McIntyre, who was just on campus this past weekend. He's the number 2 quarterback in the country. He's at number 16, I think, overall in the country on On3. So he's out of Nashville. He's got those great college coaching, genes to him. He's a basketball player. He's been at LSU a couple times now, and he's pretty high on the Tigers. I'm set to catch up with him later on Monday. Look, Joe Sloan, he's on the top 2 quarterbacks in the country for the class of 2025. It's a class that you have Ricky Collins in 2023 coming in. You got Colin Hurley committed in 24. You could get – I mean, if you could come away with either one of those guys, I mean, you are sitting so pretty long-term at the quarterback position now.
I mean, that's a grand slam if you get either of these 2 guys. But as you mentioned, when you already have 3 quarterbacks on campus, you expect Nussmeier to be here at least a couple more years. You're now bringing in Colin Hurley behind Ricky Collins. These guys just finished up sophomore years. Swing for the fences. There are other quarterbacks out there who are very good that they're keeping up with, but they haven't offered yet. And these are your 2 early offers. They are 2 of the best quarterbacks in the country, no doubt. They've both already been to campus. McIntyre's been to campus 3 times now, I think, in the span of 6 months. So his interest is obviously real. I don't know what the percentage chances are that they get either guy. I would think they may have a better shot at McIntyre than Underwood, but that's probably because he's from Nashville. It's obviously a lot closer to Michigan, and that he has already visited multiple times. But swing for the fences. That's what you do here. If you don't get him, not a big deal. Recruit the next guy. And I've said it before on the podcast, with the transfer portal, if you miss on a class or if something happens and things go awry and a guy leaves on, you can go fix it. So if I'm Joe Sloan, I'm doing exactly what he's doing, recruiting the two best guys you feel like are out there.
Yep, no question about it. Now we're going to kind of close out the rankings talk. And look, we could break it down more for you guys, and we will later on. There's a lot of offseason to go for sure, but wanted to highlight 3 guys for you that made the top 50 in the new On 300. And they're 3 skill players. And I'm going to lead off with the one that we just caught up with. Certainly, really talented. He's from the same area as Colin Hurley and Jamie French, the 4-star wide receiver. He debuted as a number 15 overall prospect in the country, the number 3 wide receiver in the nation. He's a huge target for Cortez Hankton and just picked up an offer on his visit. So expect LSU to turn up the heat there in a big way. He is dynamic.
I didn't know if you were going to keep reading all 3 of them off. I was just going to give a stat to follow them up. So while you keep going, or you want me to step in here?
Yeah, no. While you queue up that stat, okay. I'll mention the other 2 with notes on each. Devin Sanchez, 4-star cornerback out of Houston North Shore, so where Denver Harris hails from, and LSU's had a little bit of success over the years recruiting North Shore. He checks in at number 23 overall, number 3 corner in the country. He is elite, 6'2", 160, just one of the most dynamic athletes in the country. And LSU is going to host him later on this spring in April as well. So they'll get their shot. Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, Oklahoma, many others in on him early on. And then finally, one that continues to let us know that LSU's right near the top of his list, and that's Katie Jordan, wide receiver out of Texas. Andrew Marsh checks in at number 24 overall, just behind Devin Sanchez, the number 4 wide receiver in the country. He's been to LSU a ton. 6 foot, 175-pound prospect. LSU actually leads the On3 recruiting prediction machine for him. He is dynamic. Saw him at the underclassmen combine in San Antonio, and he was a top performer. LSU's got some really elite prospects right at the top of this initial On 300. I mean, if you're saying, okay, they could go get a George McIntyre, land a Harlem Berry and a Jabari Antoine out of Westgate, and then you could stack in an Andrew Marsh. I mean, that would be 4 right there if the rankings ended today. And that's not counting a Devin Sanchez or a Jamie French. So LSU's in on some of the top prospects in the country overall. And, we'll have to see how those chips fall.
Yeah. Okay. So here are the quick, what does it all mean? What are the chances update here on the On3 recruiting prediction machine? And it's early. These guys just finished sophomore seasons, a lot of recruiting to go, but Jamie French out of Jacksonville, FSU leads the way right now. LSU in the number 2 spot on the On3 RPM. You mentioned a guy like Devin Sanchez. His visit's coming up. Right now, Texas and Oklahoma lead the way on the On3 RPM, but he is a Houston kid at North Shore. LSU's recruited the school for decades, so you're going to be involved in that one. And certainly I think that they'll start to creep up the On3 RPM for him. And then Andrew Marsh, LSU leads the way on the On3 RPM ahead of Oklahoma. That's thanks to a number of visits and him showing some early interest in the Tigers. But I should also say, Billy, I wrote the rundown and I told you and I to pick out some prospects in the top 50 and just talk about 5 or 6 of them. And we did the quarterbacks and these guys. I should actually have changed that because we picked guys that are all in the top 25. So drives home that, look, LSU's in it, getting top 25 players onto campus early and often here in this cycle. Then you toss in Jabari Antoine out of Westgate here in Louisiana. He's the number 21 prospect overall. And then Harlem Berry at number 13 overall. That's 7 or 8 guys right there in the top 25 that they are heavily in the mix for.
Yeah, no question about it. And there will be guys that emerge. I mean, as true targets for LSU, especially, I think of a state like Texas. I mean, that's a state that LSU really wants to recruit hard and get into even more. And there are numerous Texas prospects that dot the rest of the on 300 already, and some have LSU offers, some don't. So this is a really good group, I think. Just kind of scrolling through the on 300 today, a lot of familiar names from some of these camps, guys that have been on the radar for a while. So LSU is going to take their stab at a lot of them, but they won't have to go far if they play their cards right with Louisiana in 2025. That's for sure.
I'm excited. All right, this wasn't even a recruiting pod, but we gave it to him.
Yep, we're going to have to come up with even more. Another massive recruiting weekend to come this weekend, though, so we're going to talk about that on the recruiting pod. We'll have a lot more discussion on the recruiting podcast later this week, so be sure to tune into that. We appreciate all you guys who have subscribed to the YouTube channel. We're now over 3,300 subscribers on that. Appreciate all of you guys who have subscribed to the BengalTiger.com. For that $10 for 4-month deal, be sure to jump on that. Not going to last much longer. Appreciate everybody for listening to this pod. Gone almost 40 minutes for you guys, so we will catch you guys later in the week with another edition, and keep it locked on thebengaltiger.com. For Shea Dixon, I'm Billy Embody. We'll catch you next time.